Okay, welcome back. This is lesson 2 of GCSE Geography. So today we're going to be looking at how humans begin to impact on the natural environment. Now you might remember in year 7 you did a little national parks role play where you all took on the points of view of different people using national parks in Wales. We used the Brecon Beacons at the time, and we looked at how those groups conflict with each other because they all want to use a national park for different things. It links to that, but more related to how the way we use national parks has an impact on the environment within them. So what we're going to do today, the main aims, remember you don't need to write these down, they're just to give you a heads up. We're going to develop a meaning for the term sustainable tourism. Now sustainable is a massive concept within geography, so it's good to get it introduced early on and get you familiar with the idea. We're also going to evaluate ways in which national parks in Wales can be managed sustainably. So basically, how can we reduce the damage being caused by people on the environment? And we're going to do our first past paper question. Now, don't stress or panic about it. Practice makes perfect. If you feel a bit lost with this today, that's exactly why we're doing it, because the more we practice, the better we're going to get at attempting these styles of questions. Okay, so could you write down that title? Human impact on the environment, national parks. If you want to write Gwaith Bath and the date, whatever date you're attempting this lesson on, you can write that down as well. But if you just pause for a moment and go ahead and do that, please, on a new page. Okay, so to get us warmed up, I want to revisit what we were talking about last lesson with regards to distinctive features of a landscape. So what you've got here is a photograph from inside Snowdonia National Park, one of the 3 national parks in Wales that you labelled on your physical map of Wales last lesson. So we've got Snowdonia National Park up in the north, we've got the Brecon Beacons down in the south, and to the far west we've got the Pembrokeshire Coastal National Park as well. So this is a photo from within Snowdonia National Park. We're going to be focusing on Snowdonia National Park today as our example. What I'd like you to do is see if you can just identify, don't write anything down, but just activate that prior knowledge, identify what you think are distinctive features of this landscape. If you want to make just a bullet point list of notes in the back of your book, see if you can come up with 3 to 5 distinctive features from this photograph. Okay, so if you have written down or thought of any of the following types of things, then you're along the right lines. If you said anything to do with the relief, like there's mountainous relief in the background of the image, flatter relief in the foreground, that you can see a lake here, that the quality of the grassland in the front of the photo is quite shrubby and poor, whereas in the centre of the image the grassland looks much higher quality, perhaps it's agricultural land, that you can also see that there is a residential land use going on here, most probably a farm, and that the area maybe has quite poor road access. This is quite a small country lane running along here, so perhaps the area is quite isolated. Anything along those kinds of lines, you're doing pretty well. So now that we've sort of got ourselves engaged in thinking about learning, let's move on to just a little outline of what Snowdonia National Park actually is. So it's this green area here. It's the largest national park in Wales. It covers 838 square miles, which is equivalent to over 2,000 square kilometres. And as you labelled last lesson on your map, it's home to Wales's highest mountain, Mount Snowdon, at over 1,000 metres high. So just to give you some context, this is the area that we're going to be using as an example to look at how the number of people that visit this region have an impact on the environment. Snowdonia National Park, according to Wikipedia, actually gets 14 million visitors a year. Now, when you put that into perspective, that there's only 3 million people living in Wales, there's an awful lot of people going to this one area. And we're going to look at why that is first of all. So you don't need to write any of that down. The first thing I'd like you to now write down underneath your main title is these two sub-questions. What is a national park? And leave just a couple of lines worth of space. We're just going to write a really simple definition in there. And then also, why is pressure on national parks increasing? Now, what I'd like you to do to answer both of these is use the video that's in this lesson 2 folder. It gives you a little breakdown of reasons why the pressure on national parks is increasing. Now, what we mean by pressure is the number of visitors. So human activity putting pressure on the natural environment. Why are more people visiting national parks now than ever before, basically? Now, there's 7 reasons in the video clip. I'd like you to watch it and just make a really brief bullet point list, please. Okay, so what you should have gotten from that video is that basically our lifestyles have changed greatly over the last couple of decades. We've got more paid time off than we used to have. We get paid better salaries than before. The word affluent was in there. Affluent areas are rich areas. Affluence is to do with money. So people have got more disposable income to spend because our salaries are higher. We have greater awareness of the beauty of the countryside through social media. We've got more time off. People are living longer. Retired people like to visit the countryside. They like the peace and quiet. So due to the increased life expectancy, we've got more retired people going to visit the national parks as well. And the road networks are far better now than ever before. So it's quicker and easier to access national parks. Hand in hand with that is we have more cars now than ever before. It used to be you were lucky to have 1 car per household. Now quite often, maybe both parents, if they still live in the household, have got a car each. Maybe older siblings and brothers and sisters have got a car each. So all of this combines to mean that 14 million people are visiting Snowdonia every year. All national parks around the world are experiencing various pressures. It could be the Serengeti in Africa, or like we're looking at here, it's Snowdonia National Park. All of these additional visitors, what damage could this cause? There's several ways in which people can cause damage to the natural environment. First off, this is an image of what we call footpath erosion. Now, erosion means the breaking down and removal of material. What happens, unfortunately, is visitors do not stick to footpaths. They kind of wander off to the edges, they wander off wherever they please, and that causes the footpath to actually widen, where previously there would have been vegetation that was probably home to animals. Right, so that habitat there has been lost, and the animals that were living in that habitat would have also been lost, perhaps causing a decline in animal populations. Another issue, traditional stone walling is really common in Snowdonia National Park, and farmers use this as boundaries in their farmland. But when you then get hikers and people walking over these areas, they tend to just clamber over these dry stone walls, causing damage, as you can see here. Now that's going to mean that the farmers' animals escape. They could cause road traffic accidents, they could get lost, they could get killed, and that's going to mean that farmers lose income. That's going to affect their livelihood. In addition, dry stone walling is actually very expensive to repair, and the farmers would have to foot that bill. Next, we've got quite a sad image of litter being left behind, where people either have, I think this is what's been left behind from perhaps some wild camping. People also leave disposable barbecues behind, all sorts of rubbish and litter that's often got food residue still within it. Animals smell that, wildlife smells that, they come along and try to eat it and quite often ingest, they quite often take in the rubbish as well. And that's going to cause choking and poisoning, again, causing a decline in animal populations. It also just doesn't look very nice either. National parks aren't only home to wildlife, they're home to people as well. You've got a lot of traditional villages quite often within national parks, and this is not nice to look at if you live there. It also creates something called stigma, which is a negative idea attached to an area. And if people start to associate litter and visual pollution like this With areas in national parks, less people are going to visit. Next, of course, how do people get to national parks? We've just mentioned it's all in all the extra cars that we've got now. Now, where are you going to park them all? Quite often on grass verges, and that causes even more habitat destruction. And more cars means more air pollution. Now, this causes two issues. Firstly, it's going to mean that people living in the area, if you've already got asthma or another respiratory issue like that, it's going to make that a lot worse. And that lowers something that we call quality of life, how happy and healthy you are. If there's a lot of traffic coming into the national park where you live, there's going to be a lot of air pollution from the exhausts, and that could make your breathing issues like asthma much worse. So you're going to feel quite stressed out and unhealthy. In addition, of course, as we know, air pollution adds to climate change, and it's going to have quite a large scale impact if we've got cars like this concentrating in small areas, causing traffic jams and lots of air pollution. Finally, we've got something called honeypots. Now, we've all heard the phrase like bees to honey. A honeypot is a small group of usually businesses within a national park that attract the visitors all into one area. It would have started off as perhaps a little traditional souvenir shop, maybe a little information centre, but as more and more people visit national parks, bigger companies start to cotton on that there's money to be made here, and you get what we call multinational companies, MNCs, like Starbucks, Costa, Tesco Express setting up here as well. And the more businesses that set up, yes, it's going to make money for the local economy, but it's going to attract more and more people into a small area, and that means more and more rubbish, more and more traffic, more and more noise and air pollution, more and more problems for the environment. So we've got footpath erosion, stone walls being broken down, litter, traffic congestion, and honeypots are our 5 main issues associated with too many visitors going to national parks. Now, visitors, though, means money, and money going into the economy is a good thing for an area. So we've got a bit of a problem here. We want people to still be able to visit and enjoy the area, spend their money in the area, in local B&Bs, in local shops and businesses, and boost the economy of the area. Visitors are a good thing when it comes to the economy, but as we can see here, they're a bad thing when it comes to the environment. This brings us on to this idea of sustainable that I was talking about earlier. To sustain means to keep something going. In the case of geography, this is going to crop up all the time. Sustainable, the true definition, and I'd like you to write this top sentence in your books with a big star next to it. If you've got highlighters, perhaps think about highlighting it because this is going to come up all the time, this idea. It's meeting the needs of today without making it difficult for people in the future to meet their needs. So in this case, we're talking about allowing tourists to still visit the national park and boost the economy, spend their money in the area, but in a way that doesn't damage the environment or affect people already living there in a negative way. So pause for a minute and just make sure you've got that definition of sustainable in your books. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is how can we allow people to still visit a national park, but in a way that doesn't cause the damage we were talking about earlier. So you've got here the problems that I spoke about previously. Okay, there's your footpath erosion, damaged stone walls, litter, cars parking everywhere, and traffic congestion and honeypots. On this side, you've got possible sustainable solutions split down the middle. What are the upsides and downsides of the possible solutions? What I'd like you to do, take a whole page of your book turned sideways and draw out this table. I'm going to give you things to put in the empty boxes in a moment. So pause this here for a minute, take a ruler, a pencil and your pen. Give yourself plenty of space. Maybe even if you've got quite big writing, take a double page in your book, turn sideways, and copy what is here so far. Okay, so once you've got this set up, on the next slide, okay, we've got possible solutions. All right, so I've put the advantages to possible solutions in green and the drawbacks to possible solutions in red. What you need to do is activate knowledge that you may have already, coupled with what we've discussed so far, to match up which of these green advantages could help to solve which problem and which of these downsides goes with the possible solutions to each problem. Okay, so what you should end up with is a complete table that outlines each of the issues created by too many visitors, along with the upsides and downsides of possible solutions to each of those issues. You're more than welcome to use different coloured pens as I have, or perhaps use highlighters or some kind of colour coding. It really does help to break things down visually when you come to revise in your books. So pause here for a minute and see if you can mix and match these into the correct boxes and have a fully completed table in your books. Okay, the final task for today is an exam style question. Now, I spoke last lesson about how you're going to be assessed. There's 2 exams of an hour and a half each. Now, the way the questions are structured, the highest marking questions on the paper are either worth 6 marks, as in this example, or 8 marks. So we're going to go straight in and practice one of the highest marking questions on the paper. This exact question came up one year, in fact. The question is, evaluate one or more strategies for managing landscapes in Wales. Now, whenever you get a question, always take a minute. Don't just think, oh, managing landscapes, I know loads about that, and smash down on the page everything you know about sustainable management in Snowdonia. That's not what you need to do here. Number 1, you'll probably write more than you need to and waste time. Number 2, you risk going off on tangents and not actually addressing the question, and therefore not getting the marks that you need. So the very first thing to do is look for what we call a command word. A command word tells you the angle from which to approach the question. In this case, the command word is evaluate. What does evaluate actually mean? Now, usually when I ask the class that, they go, explain. Evaluate and explain are linked but different. Okay, if I said to you, evaluate the meal you had for dinner last night, evaluate the most recent Avengers movie, what I'm asking you to do is talk about the good and bad. Oh, well, this was really good and I enjoyed this, or this tasted good, or that was exciting, but actually this and this and this, not so much. That's evaluating. The next part of the question that I want you to pay attention to is it says one or more strategies. You could talk about just one strategy for managing landscapes, but you've got to try and squeeze 6 marks out of just one. Now, sometimes it will say evaluate one strategy, and you're going to have to do that in a lot of detail to access all 6 marks. But in this case, you've got an out. It says one or more. So I would suggest you talk about more than one strategy here to access all 6 of those marks. One or more ways of managing landscapes in Wales. What this is a posh way of saying is, how can we go about protecting national parks in Wales from the damage caused by too many visitors, which is exactly what we've just done in that table. So to summarise, to tackle this question, first off, look at the command word. Here it is evaluate. That means you need to talk about good things and bad things. If you only talk about one side of it, you're only going to get a maximum of 3 marks. In fact, this is level marked, and if you don't talk about positives and negatives, they actually cap you at 2 out of 6. It says one or more. It could be tricky to get 6 marks out of only talking about one strategy, so choose a couple. If this was an 8 marker, I'd say maybe choose 3. It's just a 6 marker, so talking about 2 strategies would be plenty. okay? But the secret here is to elaborate. Another word for elaborate is to explain, okay? It's worth 6 marks. If you choose to talk about 2 strategies, so you might talk about the park and ride scheme and installing more bins. Or you might talk about covering footpaths in natural materials like gravel and wood chippings and putting in more bins, whatever it is. Choose 2 of the strategies from the table, but you must, for each point you make, elaborate as to why is it a good thing or why is it a bad thing. So, for example, one sustainable strategy could be covering footpaths in gravel or wood chippings. Right, that is the strategy, but you haven't told me anything good or bad about it. So what I'm getting at is, don't stop there. If you said something like, one sustainable strategy could be covering footpaths in gravel or wood chippings, this would help to reduce footpath erosion, therefore protecting habitats and animal populations. However, because gravel and wood chippings are natural materials, they will also erode over time, and so it could need a lot of maintenance, which may become expensive in the long run. Do you see? So I want you to use your elaborating words. Things like this means, therefore, as a result, furthermore, in addition, consequently. Now, this is the first time you've tried one of these questions, so I have provided you with a writing frame here. You don't have to use the strategies that I've put in the writing frame. I've gone for fencing off footpaths and I've gone for the park and ride scheme. You could do the bins, you could do the planning permission, you could do whatever you want, okay? But the secret is talk about why it's a good thing, elaborate. Talk about why it's a bad thing, elaborate. And then for another method, talk about one strategy and why it's a good thing, and elaborate. Talk about the downside, elaborate. Okay, so what's good and what's bad, well elaborated, would pick me up 3 marks. What's good and what's bad, well elaborated, would pick me up another 3 marks. There would be your 6. If you're writing for this more than 3/4 of a page in your book, you're waffling. Okay? Give it your best shot. Don't stress about it too much. We learn just as much by getting things completely wrong as we do by getting them right. Okay, now when we go back to school, we'll take a look at this together and we'll peer and self-assess it and break it down and add to it to improve our answer together. But basically, this concludes the second lesson of your Unit 1, Theme 1 Geography. If you have any questions, as usual, please do drop me an email. I check my emails daily and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible.